Question 1. A solutions architect needs to configure an auto-scaling group to launch new EC2 instances with specific settings, including the AMI, instance type, and EBS volume configuration. Which component should the architect use, and which is the most recommended option? Option A. A launch configuration, which is the latest and most flexible option. Option B. A launch template, which offers more features and flexibility like versioning. Option C. A scaling policy, to define the instance blueprint. Option D. An EC2 instance store, to save the instance configuration. The correct answer is a launch template, which offers more features and flexibility like versioning. Here's the explanation. Launch templates are the recommended and more flexible option for defining how new EC2 instances are launched within an ASG. They offer features like versioning, specifying multiple instance types or purchase options, and support for newer EC2 features that launch configurations do not. Question 2. An application running on EC2 instances within an ASG behind an elastic load balancer, ELB, is experiencing issues where individual instances sometimes become unresponsive at the application layer, even though the EC2 instance itself appears healthy. Which health check configuration should be used to ensure the ASG replaces these instances proactively? Option A. Use the default EC2 status checks only. Option B. Configure the ASG to use ELB health checks. Option C. Manually terminate the unresponsive instances when detected. Option D. Implement a scheduled scaling policy to replace instances periodically. The correct answer is configure the ASG to use ELB health checks. Here's the explanation. EC2 status checks only monitor the health of the EC2 instance itself, system status, and instance status. ELB health checks, however, can be configured to check the application's responsiveness, e.g., HTTP 200OK response from a web server. By configuring the ASG to use ELB health checks, it can detect application-level unhealthiness and automatically replace the problematic instances. Question 3. An administrator configures an ASG with a minimum capacity of 2, a desired capacity of 4, and a maximum capacity of 6. A scaling policy is set to scale out when CPU utilization exceeds 70%. If the current CPU utilization is 80% and the ASG currently has 4 instances, what will happen? Option A. The ASG will immediately launch 2 new instances, reaching the maximum capacity. Option B. The ASG will launch instances according to the scaling policy, up to the maximum of 6 instances. Option C. The ASG will do nothing, as the desired capacity is already met. Option D. The ASG will terminate 2 instances to reduce the load. The correct answer is the ASG will launch instances according to the scaling policy, up to the maximum of 6 instances. Here's the explanation. The ASG's scaling policies take precedence when triggered, and it will attempt to scale out up to the maximum capacity. Since the current count, 4, is below the maximum 6, the ASG will launch new instances based on the scaling policy until the trigger condition is resolved or the maximum capacity is reached. The desired capacity is a target, but scaling policies can temporarily cause the instance count to exceed it, up to the maximum capacity. Question 4. A company needs to deploy a high-performance computing (HPC) cluster on EC2 that requires extremely low network latency and high network throughput between instances for inter-node communication. Which EC2 placement group type should be used? Option A. Spread placement group. Option B. Partition placement group. Option C. Cluster placement group. Option D. Dedicated placement group. The correct answer is cluster placement group. Here's the explanation. Cluster placement groups are designed to pack instances closely together within a single availability zone, often on the same physical rack. to achieve low network latency and high network throughput. Spread placement groups prioritize fault tolerance, and partition placement groups offer a balance for large-scale distributed systems. There is no dedicated placement group type. Question 5. A solutions architect is designing a highly available, critical distributed database system where the failure of a single underlying physical server must not impact more than one database instance. The application requires a maximum of 5 instances per availability zone. Which EC2 placement group type is most suitable? Option A, cluster placement group. Option B, spread placement group. Option C, partition placement group. Option D, affinity placement group. The correct answer is spread placement group. Here's the explanation. Spread placement groups ensure that each instance is placed on distinct underlying hardware, different physical servers, racks, to maximize fault tolerance, making them ideal for critical systems where correlated failures must be minimized. The small instance limit, e.g., 7 instances per AZ, is also a characteristic of spread placement groups, fitting the maximum of 5 instances requirement. Cluster groups prioritize performance, and partition groups are for larger-scale fault tolerance. Question 6. Which statement is true regarding the scope and behavior of EC2 placement groups? Option A. Cluster placement groups can span multiple availability zones to enhance performance. Option B. Existing EC2 instances can be moved into or out of any placement group. Option C. If AWS cannot satisfy the placement constraints of a placement group, the instance launch will fail. Option D. All placement group types guarantee a static IP address for instances. The correct answer is, if AWS cannot satisfy the placement constraints of a placement group, the instance launch will fail. Here's the explanation. If AWS cannot meet the specific placement requirements, e.g., not enough contiguous capacity for cluster, or distinct hardware for spread, the instance launch will fail. Cluster placement groups are strictly limited to a single availability zone. Existing instances cannot be moved into or out of a placement group. They must be launched into it. Placement groups do not inherently guarantee static IP addresses. Elastic IPs or NLBs are used for that. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel.